And I want to tell you about our special guest, and he is Jonathan Tame. And Jonathan, would you just kind of identify yourself? There you are, Jonathan. And Jonathan, this is the second time in these 3 years he's been our special guest. And he really is a special person as well. And so let me tell you a little bit more about him. Natalie wrote you information earlier, but I'll read what Natalie wrote. She said, Jonathan is passionate about Christian social engagement with the housing crisis, dividing his time between working with homeless people in Cambridge and advising the Church of England's lead bishop for housing. Before this, he spent 10 years as director of the Jubilee Center, a Christian social research and training charity. And prior to returning to Britain in 2009, Jonathan and his wife, is her name Helen or Helene?
Just Helen.
Helen.
The end doesn't change the spelling.
Okay. And their 5 children spent 15 years working with a mission organization in Romania and then Switzerland. And while in Romania, they opened a worldview cafe in Cluj called Quo Vadis Cafe, which is where he learned the lessons which he'll share with us. And so his topic today, and by the way, when I was in Cluj a few months ago, and I was staying with Leaveview, Jonathan was there too, and it was good to see him again. Where art meets business in the service of mission. That's our topic. And he'll share some of the lessons he learned while he became an accidental businessman in Cluj, Romania. Arriving into the city with a vision to set up a worldview cafe, he discovered along the way that the arts were an integral part of realizing that vision. And so, my dear friend, Jonathan, we've known you now 7 years, and what a delightful friendship we've had over these years. And I'm so glad that you're our special guest today. Let's just kind of welcome you today. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, it's great to be with you and to have this opportunity to share again on this forum. I don't have a huge amount to say. I don't think I'm going to take quite as long as perhaps some of the other people who speak. But I will share for sort of 10 minutes or so and then show you some pictures about what I've been referring to. And then maybe we can have a conversation after that. So what I wanted to really talk about is how art and business can complement each other. And especially all that we learned as we opened this cafe in Cluj in Romania. But I've got to take you back even beyond that time to a cellar cafe in Krakow in Poland in the spring of 1994. I was down there. This cafe had an amazing atmosphere, old brick vaulted ceiling, the lighting, the decor, the 3 musicians playing kind of mellow jazz on the side. The coffee was great. And the conversations around the table seemed to be earnest, thoughtful, serious. It seemed to me. Now, of course, the conversations were pretty much all in Polish, so I had no idea what they were saying. But the impression I had was that this was a young, recently post-communist generation seeking to make sense of the enormous changes that were going on in their world following the collapse of Marxism, and all that was flowing into the vacuum left behind by the communist regime. So something really special touched me in that place. That atmosphere seemed really inspiring. And as I reflected on that visit, knowing that God was calling me to move to that part of the world of the recently ex-communist world of Eastern Europe, and to work there in the context of a mission organization, the idea began to form in my imagination and gradually take root. And that idea was to start a worldview cafe. Really, that was the phrase, a worldview cafe. And I had no idea what a worldview cafe was, but somehow it was inspired by that visit in Poland. And I knew it was something I needed to pray into. And sometimes when you have a vague vision that you sense is from God, but you don't quite know what it's to look like, you feed it, don't you, with prayer, imagination, conversation, and so on. So I married soon after that to Helen. We moved to Romania. We spent 5 years in one city in the northeast of Romania called Iași, and then we moved in the year 2000 to Cluj. And then in 2002, so this is 8 years after I got that sense of Worldview Cafe, God finally opened the door for this vision to begin to emerge into the light of day. And with the help of a wonderful supporter, we were able to purchase a newly renovated apartment in the ground floor of a grand late 19th century building next to the Central Park in Cluj, and to start work on it. Well, what was the idea? What was the concept? This Worldview Cafe idea was to be a place that would encourage people and provide a space where they could reflect on how the world and society was changing around them, the movements, the ideas that were creating huge cultural shifts as the tide of Western values and economic sort of models an alternative ideology, if you like, came sweeping in over the worn out landscape that was left behind by the faded and failed communist ideology. And into that changing landscape, rapidly changing landscape, we were called to sow the seeds of meaning and hope and purpose, which the biblical worldview and vision for society offer. So that was the idea. It was a kind of a place that would encourage people to think and reflect and connect, above all, in a sense, with each other, but also with God, with the Bible, and with this vision for society informed by the scriptures. And the Worldview Cafe idea, as we'd nurtured it thus far, was to be somehow a neutral place that was, if you like, metaphorically halfway between the church on the one hand and the marketplace or the university or the town hall on the other. So a place, a meeting place, if you like. And we realized as we thought about, well, how do we practically start this up? We thought there were two main options, really. It was either would be like a private club with members who would come at certain times when it was open. And that would work if all we wanted to do was put on events. But the other option was to actually open a regular commercial cafe and to use that as a platform for the Worldview ministry. And we somewhat reluctantly concluded that that was the right way to go. And so I say that because, you know, that's how I became an accidental businessman. I never went to Romania to start the business. But I had no experience at all of doing that in the past, or even working in the private sector, apart from a few jobs when I was a student. So it was a big step, a big challenge for me. But we started to get help and advice from various other people with experience in business and worldview ministry, especially a guy called Ellis Potter from Le Brie. I don't know if many of you have met him or know Ellis Potter, but he was a wonderful encourager, and he came 2 or 3 times to visit. Anyway, in those conversations, the penny dropped, the first penny, as we say in English, the penny dropped. So I realized that the business itself should be an expression of that worldview ministry, not just a platform for it. And this was a real seismic shift in my thinking. And it made me realize that the way we should go about all the aspects of setting up and running the business, that they could be an expression of a biblical vision for all of life. And rather than just the events and the conversations that would take place there. And so this opened up an amazing opportunity to think through what a business should look like when it's rooted in this idea of the lordship of Christ over the whole of life. And as we did that, we realized that art should play a really significant part in it. Now, there was already one element of art which we knew we wanted to bring to this cafe. We wanted to display paintings and other artworks that would function in the same way as parables in the Gospels. So if you think about it, when Jesus told a parable, there was a superficial meaning, a kind of everyday meaning, but there was also a deeper one, which was about the kingdom. And so we discovered a wonderful artist, Swedish artist called Jan-Erik Johansson, and he had done a couple of paintings which absolutely inspired us like this, with a sort of superficial visual piece, if you like, but it represented something much deeper. But that would only come, a casual viewer would just miss that, but someone needed to stop and reflect and think before they began to realize and see what that deeper meaning was. So we wanted artworks in the cafe that would work in this way. But then as we thought and prayed through what a hospitality venue should look like, if it's to reflect the nature and character of the God who created the universe in all its beauty and wonder, we realized that every element of that place should be designed to be part of a unified whole, and that beauty should permeate every aspect of that cafe. And so we began to think differently. As well as buying artwork, we decided to change the budget which we'd prepared and spend at least twice as much as we had planned on the furniture. We decided to get all the furniture made by local artists or artisans. And so there were these beautiful wrought iron chairs that we had made and tables by local artists. I'll tell you a bit later the story of how the whole decor was put together. But we ended up working with a team of local artists and artisans who made everything that was to go in the cafe. And in this, we thought about that, we realized that the smallest details mattered. So when we had a fridge in the cafe, we didn't just put it there as this big white, we talk about white goods, don't we? Because they're very big and bold and white. So we covered it up so that you could only see into the fridge with all the cakes and so on, but we covered the outside in something more beautiful, more attractive. There was a notice board that a notice that every business has to put up in Romania, every shop. And it says in Romanian, of course, you must take your receipt with you, keep it with you until you leave the shop. And in most places, this notice is simply printed on a piece of A4 paper and stuck on the wall. It is boring, it's ugly, everyone knows what it says. So we turned that into a work of art. And I'll show you a little picture of it later. We also, the smallest things mattered. And we wanted to bring that same carefulness, that craft, that design, that beauty into the smallest details, but also into the hidden aspects. So we wanted what was hidden to be treated the same way and as the more prominent ones. And so when we created the toilets at the back of the cafe, I insisted that they were I said, I want these to be the best public toilets in the town. I want these to be a pleasant place to go to the loo. And I always made a point as the owner of the cafe of using those loos, not the staff loo around the back. And we brought little artistic details into the signage as well around the toilet. So instead of saying, men and women, or putting up a little symbol, we put up paintings of famous couples, so, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette or whatever. We would put those on the two doors. as a way to sort of signify, you know, which is which. So most of what we designed and made was deliberate, but sometimes we were taken by surprise. So at our opening event, we had the professor of ceramics from the university in Cluj. He attended and he remarked afterwards, he said, "This is very interesting. You've managed to create a postmodern style here." And so we thought, oh, have we? Oh, well, thank you very much. So we came up with a whole new artistic concept. So we like to think. But anyway, let me tell you another couple of points around the how art came to be a key part of the business. Just across the park from where we were, the fine art faculty was located. And so some of the students came. Most of them couldn't handle the fact we were a non-smoking cafe. And so a lot of them were put off. But some came and they stayed. And we soon decided to allow art students the opportunity to exhibit some of their work on the walls of the cafe. For many of them, it was their very first public exhibition. And some of those works of art weren't the best, but it cost us nothing. And it brought in a new kind of community. It brought in new customers. And more importantly, it went a small way towards affirming those students in their vocation, giving them a chance to show their best. And I think the significance of that was really a lot for some of those young people. We had some remarkable events, which I will talk to you about briefly when we look at the pictures, which involved the artworks as a way of opening up wonderful conversations about really profound issues and questions in life. So those are some of the positive contributions which art made to the business of the cafe. But there are some negative sides as well, and we have to be realistic about this. So as I was thinking about who we should get to design and transform the cafe and do the decor and everything, there was one other cafe I'd seen in Cluj, and the guy who owned that had overseen the whole transformation of that space. It was fantastic, and I thought, I want this guy to do it. But he was not a very reputable businessman, let's say. He had various court cases against him. I learned the one mutual friend we knew said, "Oh, I wouldn't trust him, you know, too much if I were you." But somehow I took a big risk in that, because I thought, I really want this guy to do this and his team to do the transformation. And so he said to me, he said, yes, he'd like to do it. How much do you have? What's your budget? And I didn't have a lot. I think I had $8,000 to do the whole redecoration, all the furniture, the refitting and everything. I said, well, we've got $8,000. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll do it for that. He agreed to do it. He signed the contract, but the timing was a disaster, because he treated it a little bit like a hobby. When he didn't have anything else to do, he would come around and his team would do it, and then he would disappear for weeks. Oh, it was a disaster. But you know, because I'd signed that contract, it ended up taking, all in all, it took about a year to transform the place, as opposed to 3 months. And that just caused such a lot of tension and stress and difficulty. But the end result was worth it. It was a bit like a pregnancy. You know, you go through all that, and the pain at the end there was a lot of pain at the end. But once it came forth, if you like, this amazing cafe, we were really glad about it. So why don't I show you some pictures, just so you can see what I've been talking about. Can I share screen, Natalie? Okay, let's see if I can find it. See if this is going to work. All right. Can you see which one can you see? Can you see the screen of a large, boring, plain room?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, this is how the place looked when we bought it, and then we transformed it. So, oh, where did I click? Here we go. So it ended up looking like that, and that was one of the main rooms where we had our meetings. This was the other room when we bought it. Well, I used it temporarily as an office, and then after we transformed it, oh, there's another view of it. But it was an incredible transformation of this space, and the artworks that we brought. So the one I told you about, Jan Erik Johansson. This one on the left is the sevens, we called them, and that was the one which we asked if we could make a copy of that painting, and that was the first thing that we put in the cafe, because it did exactly what I was talking about. It was like a parable. There's a superficial meaning and then a much more profound one. And then on the right is one by Yurie Kojakaru, again a painting which is depicting the arrest of Saul of Tarsus by the Holy Spirit on the way to Damascus, and we think it's an incredible painting about, if you like, conversion, how our lives can be turned around. And so both these paintings and others were fantastic opportunities for people who would stop and look and take time with a work of art. We could then have a great conversation with them. Talked about the detail. On the right here is putting a frame around that, the notice about keeping your receipt with you until you leave the shop. We use the same kind of colors and branding. I'm afraid I haven't, these are like 20 years old, and so the photos are not brilliant. The resolution isn't great, but here's the table and the chairs made by the local artisans. Just some of the little details of decor you can see, where the cookie jars are, bringing that artistic touch into everything we tried to do. Here are some of the details just of the space, and bringing that style, that unifying theme right the way through was so key. Because you see, that's what a biblical worldview is, isn't it? It's something that unites all of life, if you like. There's a theme, there's these visual elements that we had going all the way through. We had 2 or 3 kind of key visual design elements, if you like, and with the colors, this washed out sort of faded look, and that went right through all the different things that we created sort of physically for the cafe. There's an example of the fridge, which has been sort of clad in something more, beautiful wood there. The coat hanger to the left, was made again out of wrought iron. We tried to make sure that there was nothing mundane or ordinary in the whole cafe. And then we had events. You can see that on the right there. Various kinds. There's the sofa, which we used to see it. That was again wrought iron, wonderful sort of design above the sofa, and on the across the on the walls all around, we could exhibit various paintings and other works of art. Those are our menus as well. That was the outdoor menu that we wanted as well to be beautiful and attractive, and again to have some of those same visual themes in it. This is one of the events I wanted to talk about. This was after sooner after we left, but our colleagues carried on, and they said let's organize an art competition, and it was remarkable. It was about the theme of emigration. Now, here in Britain, we constantly go on and on about the problems of immigration, and likewise in the States and so on. But for so much of the Eastern Europe and the former communist world, the challenge was emigration. And Romania, amongst others, and the rest of you who are from that part of the world, the eastern side of Europe, you'll know what this is about. And so what we said was, we are going to have a poster competition, design a poster, and we'll give €100 prize for the best poster about emigration. And we had something like 60 or 70 entries. We only gave about a week for them to do it. And so we ended up having to plaster the walls with these remarkable posters, really. And I say, alas, I was out of the country then. I would have loved to have been there for that event, because it was remarkable, because there was a sense in which emigration does two things. Yes, people go to work in Western Europe, in the EU, they could earn far more money than in Romania. So yes, materially, they were better off, but the price of that was families split up, just often people being left behind, children left behind, and so on. And this poster competition and the event around it and the awarding the prize was an extraordinary opportunity for people to talk about the, if you like, the incredible opportunity of emigration, but the very deep cost as well. So that was a profound event, which we held. And there was another one with this young fellow in the middle, talking away as he used to. He's called Oholiab nowadays, but in those days he was called Livia Mocan. And this was, again, one of the events that was absolutely remarkable in our, as we first started events. It was called Minority Report, and we asked 4 or 5 artists who were from, they were not ethnically Romanian, but they were living in Romania. So they were from some of the ethnic minorities in the country, and we asked them to bring a representative work of art. And then in the conversation that we had on that evening, we just started to talk about the artworks. And I remember when the Romanian girl who did a lot of our design, she designed that menu for us and so on, she did our graphic design. She had been an art student, and she came up with the question to the lady who was an ethnically German, one of the Saxons who'd been in Romania for 500 years or more. And she said, talking about her ethnic Hungarian colleagues in the art school, something about how there was a kind of a hidden, much more sort of violence in some of the art that they expressed. There's this sort of bursting with sort of anger and violence. And she raised this as a question, and we kind of thought, where's this going to go? And incredibly, what happened was this extraordinary opening up of conversations around what it means to be part of a minority ethnic group in a majority, and how it is for the people in that majority group to relate to minorities. Now, all over the world, these kind of conversations, they're not very civil. They're often quite the opposite. They lead to tension and conflict. But as we were talking about works of art here in the cafe on this evening, we found that people would open up in remarkable ways and talk about their feelings, about their ethnicity, what it's like to be in a minority, and share from their hearts amongst strangers. And so this was one of the most remarkable ways which we saw God using art and art exhibitions to reach people's hearts and minds in absolutely remarkable ways. So I think I got 1 or 2 more. Oh, there's another event, a really busy event we had. This guy in the middle, at the time, he was the mayor of Cluj. He went on to become prime minister of Cluj, of Romania, and then he's back again as the mayor of Cluj now. He's been there probably a bit too long now, but anyway. we had some fantastic opportunities for events there. He was talking about business as opposed to art, but the whole atmosphere was wonderful. I think I'll finish with this picture of our opening night on the at the cafe with, again, this young artist in the middle. Anyway, who I think some of you know. Yes, I wanted to finish with something else, but maybe I'll come back to this at the end after we've had maybe a little conversation about what I've shared. But this is one other thing I want to say before we go.
Well, indeed, let's come back to that. And that's important what you're going to say still. But thank you, Jonathan. And I just want to throw this open. I want to throw this open to comments or questions. And what a wonderful story. And there are transferable concepts. And there are ideas that some of us may be able to apply to our situations. But what sayest you, dear friends?
If I can say thank you so much for a very inspiring presentation. And I'm still curious to hear more. Maybe my question would be, what is the biggest testimony, maybe some like a really big highlight of extraordinary event or a change that you saw that happened? Maybe would be delighted to hear.
Well, I mean, that event about the Minority Report, that one about the arts, I still talk about that today because that really was very, very significant. There were people in the cafe. There were people who's, you know, we found people coming and sort of having Bible studies with people there. You know, we didn't organize that. It just, people came. There were some remarkable conversations going on. We found that, yeah, there were some people who would just come and sit and look for 10 minutes at one of the paintings maybe, and then ask us about them. It was this, so there was a lot of sowing of seeds. We saw that in many ways what we were doing was not kind of the dramatic encounter, the kind of conversation that was going to completely change someone's life, but we were constantly through the way we did the business, ran the business, the way we brought art into everything, we wanted to create a place that would really inspire people. And interestingly, let me just read a quote from somebody who left a comment on one of these websites. This was in 2010, a girl called Nadia Laribi. She said, "I've been a faithful customer of Quo Vadis since 2005, when I was desperately looking for a non-smoking cafe in Cluj. Quo Vadis came to my rescue, as smoking was then and still is a grave threat to public health. We were only the second all non-smoking cafe in the city." And then she goes on to say, "Quo Vadis is a concept. When they designed it, the owners surely had people in mind. The atmosphere is unique, peaceful, the music is soothing, and the service excellent." And she goes on to say, "Quo Vadis also serves a wonderful apple pie, my usual order." So you have, you know, this kind of unsolicited comment, and people would write and give their comments. I think we had, we did, you know, I should dig them out. We had a couple of sort of guest books that we just left there, plain paper. People could write, they could draw, they could leave their impressions. And some of those I seem to remember. I've not looked for a long time, but some of them were quite profound. Some people were, yeah, just reflecting on the whole atmosphere and how it blessed them, how it was a place where they felt really peace, at ease. People proposed, you know, got engaged in the cafe. It was quite a significant place, and we like to think that it's helped to create the cafe kind of culture in Cluj, which is still there. I have no idea. That's me being perhaps a little bit pretentious. Maybe Rodica can say whether or not, or Liviu, whether how much Quo Vadis helped to open the doors for cafe culture in Cluj, high quality coffee. But anyway.
Well, that's why I turned on my camera, because I wanted to say that at the time there was only one other cafe, cake shop, Mozart, that was kind of a higher level. So you kind of set a standard, and and it was way above everything else at the time. I'm sure it inspired people, because Cluj is now a place with absolutely incredible cafes. It was even published about it. And actually, whenever we go out of Cluj, it's hard to find a good cafe like you can have in Cluj. We have more than 10 roasteries, and there are more concept cafes. Some are close to art. We have like a ceramic cafe where you can go and make your own pot and paint it, and then they burn it for you, and you can come later and pick it up, and all kind of other concepts. So I think for sure you set up a standard, both in terms of the business and in terms of having a cafe with a concept. Now we have many cafes where we have concerts, where we have book launches, where we have, depending on how everyone is specialized. And at least 2 or 3 of them are Christian business people who are doing this, and probably who in their youth had a cafe at Quo Vadis, or maybe even got engaged there.
That's true.
So thank you for Quo Vadis.
Thank you as well for sharing these wonderful stories. I have only 2 questions. If I'm allowed to ask a very practical question, and as I'm listening to wonderful stories, I'm wondering, how was the cafe financially were able to sustain itself, and was it subsidized, and was the percentage of taxes a big issue when you were opened? I guess the summertime was more, winter or autumn time was were those struggles. I mean, why I'm asking that, because in Latvia there have been few, actually I know 2 cafes, and they both were closed in Latvia because of the high taxes, and they were not able to sustain themselves, and they were both Christian cafes. And I see this pattern that people are kind of very much let down here in the government, as everyone else in other countries as well, but especially here, people they cannot even think about opening a cafe, because they know that it's not possible to sustain itself if like 60% have to be given to the taxes in Latvia. So I was just wondering how was for this case.
Yeah. Okay, we had a couple of, first of all, we absolutely insisted on doing everything correctly in terms of paying whatever taxes we needed to pay and so on. But we had 2 really major advantages. One was that we were able to buy the place with a sponsor gave us some money, so we had no rent to pay. And secondly, I didn't need to get my salary from the cafe because I had mission support, which I lived off. And likewise, a couple of the team members were part of the mission, the same mission, and so they didn't have to be supported. They didn't have to be paid from the receipts of the cafe. But so in some ways it was a successful business in that we we broke even. We didn't make a profit, but there were 2 major cost lines that we didn't have to pay. So it wasn't really, it would not have been viable otherwise. One of the problems, when we attracted students and because it was such, I just making this PowerPoint and getting my pictures out, I just thought I loved that place. It was such a wonderful place to be. And a lot of other people thought the same, because they would come and they would spend 3 hours there. They would bring their books from university. They would do their reading, their study. And how much would they spend? They bought 1 cup of tea. That was it, the cheapest thing on the menu. So you can imagine, when we only had about 40 seats or 40 or 50 places in the cafe, if you have these poor students, paying just for 1 tea for 3 hours, it's very hard to make money. We didn't, we had a little bit of alcohol. We decided, here's another thing we thought if it's already pretty crazy being non-smoking. If we had no alcohol at all, then people would think this is a really suspicious place. What is it? And so we did have alcohol, but all we had was some liqueurs, no beer, no wine, just a few liqueurs, not spirit cider, not the sort of the higher percentage alcohol. And hardly anyone ever bought them, but they were very prominent above the bar. So because we didn't sell a lot of alcohol, and we did dessert, so we did cakes and desserts and so on, but it's quite hard to make much money when you're selling quite low value items, or low cost items like teas and coffees and cakes. So yeah, it is challenging from a business point of view to make it work. And as I say, we wouldn't have succeeded if it was not for those those 2 major advantages that we had.
Thank you for sharing.
Let's see if there are other comments or questions, please.
I have a question. I know that I looked it up. Quo Vadis means where are you going? How did you come to that name for the cafe?
That was a really fun process. We had a team of 5 or 6 of us, and we spent a lot of time thinking about the name. And we had just a whole, we had a variety of, there was a long list, which we brought down to a short list. And then we went out on the streets of Cluj with a little questionnaire, and we asked a lot of younger people, students, we asked them to choose between those names. And Quo Vadis, came out on top. And I think it works really well because it is Quo Vadis dominate. If you've seen the film Quo Vadis from the 1950s, late 1950s, I think it had, I forget who was in it, but we have one of the original movie posters from the 50s. We had that, we bought that and put it up behind the bar. But it's referring in the Latin, the Vulgate version of the Bible, it's a reference in the Gospels, where are you going, Lord? I think Peter asked it of Jesus, or where are you going? So it's towards the end of maybe John's Gospel, Quo Vadis Domine. And but it's a good question to ask. So where are you going? Where's your life heading? And because it referenced the film, we used quite a lot of themes from the film. So the names of the cocktails, the non-alcoholic cocktails that we made, they were named after characters in the film. I say we had the poster up behind and so on. So it was a rich, in itself is a little bit of a parable. It's a good name. Quo Vadis Cafe, I think, is great, but it gave a lot more than just the name. It gave something of a concept. It gave a biblical reference. It gave a film which tells a great story. So yeah, it had a lot of positive things that can come out of the name, and it's worth taking time to choose the name of something new like that.
I just,
yeah.
Hi, Elisa. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It was a wonderful and interesting story about arts and business, but also, in information about you, which everybody, Vineta and Chuck shared, is about your passion for social justice and your work with homeless people. And could you explore, how these things were, addressed and how you treated, if there were people who were socially disadvantaged or homeless who came to cafe, and were they, welcome there, and how people from different strata of society could meet at that place?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, in many ways, yeah, the cafe was not aimed at that sort of target group. We didn't turn anyone away, I don't think. Some people would come with very little, but that was our, if you like, the main group we were seeking to reach through the cafe was students and young professionals. The social justice theme, we had some other ministries in Romania that we were involved in, which were more an expression of that. So working with street children's ministry was very much what we did in the first city we were in. We opened a home for, like a maternity home for girls who kept a pregnancy and were kicked out of their family as a result. And yeah, so the cafe was a different kind of ministry. It integrated a lot, but I don't think it was really addressing the social justice issue around poverty. But other things we did address that. And right now, yeah, social justice and certainly around housing, the need for housing reform. That's what I'm doing now. That's my focus for the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, I'm thinking of Eliza's comment, and I also know her context, the Anglican Church in the old town of Riga, which is a magnificent, it's a landmark, beautiful. Can such a Quo Vadis cafe be in a church?
Yes. There's a church I have in mind, which is a wonderful blend of all the things you're talking about. And it's in Trafalgar Square in London. It's called St. Martin's in the Fields. Maybe you know that. If you don't, absolutely worth looking up, because they have a fantastic outreach to homeless people in London. They have a fund, and every year they raise money. One of the big national radio stations, BBC Radio 4, they do an appeal to raise money for the Vicar's Homeless Fund, or something like that it's called. So they do a lot of social justice work, but they also have an amazing choir and an orchestra there. They have a wonderful basement cafe. It's the real deal. If you're ever in London, I'd encourage you to go and visit it's called St. Martin's in the Fields. Let me stick that in the chat. There you go. So yes is the answer.
Jonathan, I have a question for you. So what year, remind me, was Quo Vadis opened?
We opened it in 2004.
Okay.
And it closed in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously so many of these principles are timeless, but some things are very much, like of our cultural moment. Are there any things that you would do differently in 2023, if you were to set about opening Quo Vadis now?
Do you know what? I wouldn't be able to say, because the process that you go through is so critical that we took time to pray through and think through and talk through all the different elements. So a key part of creating it was the hidden process that no one ever saw, of forming the team. That some of us went on a 3 months biblical worldview course, before we then came back. So we took time to invest in the concept and in the ministry, and these conversations we had with people like Ellis Potter and even the fact that it took us, maybe we needed to take a whole year to get the place physically transformed and everything, was all part of the, it was a slow process. And so I would, we had the luxury of doing that because we were already supported in our mission work. But of course, there will be some things that change. But when I go back to Cluj, I'll always go and visit some of the cafes there, and I kind of look around and think, oh, what might I have done? What's different? What wouldn't I do? And so on. And so I think you do have to connect with the cultural moment. But I suppose one of the biggest changes would be around technology, and how you either do or you don't bring technology into it. I could imagine, I'm just throwing this out now, thinking aloud, I think it might be nice to create a technology-free cafe. So where you invite people to, you have some little lockers by the door, and you invite people to check their phone and their laptop and all their technology into that little box and leave it there, and just come and have conversation instead, something that isn't mediated through a phone, So a kind of a digital detox cafe might be very welcome. Who knows? Revive the art of a conversation, talk about a book, something without any technology involved. There you go. Sorry, you've asked that question and I've gone off on a crazy tangent, but there you go.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you.
Why did it close, if I can ask?
Well, we left about 2.5 years after it was started, and we left a team running the cafe, and the context changed, especially after the 2009 financial crash. A lot of other great cafes started up in Cluj, and my business partner, who carried on running it, he kind of ran out of steam and didn't want to, didn't really want to continue it anymore. So that's why we agreed to close it.
I wanted to just ask, so what has happened to that cafe? Did it continue under new management as a cafe, or is it an auto parts store?
No, it is a beauty salon. And Rodica, I don't know if she still does, but she used to go there for her hair. She still go there?
Yes, but unfortunately, they decided to make it modern, so they lost all the glam that you were able to bring there, and it was, very regular, modern, minimalist kind of salon. And I don't go there anymore.
Oh, it was crazy, because the people who owned the cafe before we bought it, they had modernized it, and they'd made it looked like a doctor's surgery or something like that. It was just very white, very boring, very plain, and we kind of thought, oh, they spent all this money trying to, and we had to reverse all that, and we said, we want to age it. We've got to make this look, like it might have looked, or 50, 100 years before. And then, after we leave, then they make it all modern again. But anyway, that's the
but that's a
versatility
prime
of building,
real estate. It's a very good location.
Yeah, it is. It's a great location.
More questions for Jonathan or Rodica or Liviu, since they were also, present and a part of this.
You want me to say something, Natalie?
Please.
Oh, okay. I would, with the joy. Very often we evangelicals approach the world around us with kind of aggressivity. We are aggressive. We proclaim, we do evangelism, we tell people the truth, which is good, But the Lord Jesus Christ was the friend of the sinners. And God the Father says that he is Abraham's friend. And he's talking with Abraham what he wants to do as two friends, you know. So what Quo Vadis and God has done through Jonathan was this kind of friendship, this kind of elegancy, yeah. This kind of quality of the environment and of the dialogues there, because they intentionally did not want to be aggressive with the gospel. Isn't it, Jonathan?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. We wanted it. See, one of the questions we had to wrestle with was, to what extent is this a Christian cafe? And we asked people at the time, what do you think of a Christian? If you hear the phrase a Christian cafe, well, then typically they would say, and I'm being a bit cheeky here, but they would say, well, it's normally a place that looks rather cheap, and the people are very earnest, and they want to, tell you about Jesus, as soon as they have an opportunity, and it may attract other believers, but for a non-Christian, they would kind of immediately detect, they would get a kind of a little alarm bell going off, saying, this place is a bit weird. And unless they were wanting to talk about questions of faith, then they probably wouldn't go in. So that's one of the key things. We wanted this to be a place where anyone would feel welcome and would come. And interestingly, it was the decor and the art, the visual experience was a really key part of that. Why we wanted it to be really beautiful. That's why we've had a few bottles of cherry liqueur or whatever on the shelf, so that people wouldn't think this is slightly strange. We wanted it to be a place where there were no hidden agendas. See, often a Christian cafe has got a hidden agenda. You come here for coffee, but we want to tell you about Jesus. This is the kind of the classic evangelical dilemma. So we wanted to create a place where people would feel welcome, where they would experience, if you like, the welcome of God. This idea, Liv, you talking about the friendship, that Jesus being the friend of sinners, and people would like to hang out with Jesus when they were far from the gospel to start with. But so we wanted a place where people would hang out, and we very much we trained our staff to treat everyone who came in as a special guest, not as a customer. So we didn't use the word customer. We say the people coming in the door are our guests. They're not our customers. So we're not just after the money at the end of their visit. We want to bless them. Sure, they pay for their food and their drink, but we want to bless them. So it was some of those more subtle, the softer influence, if you like. So to us, when we embrace this whole concept of a biblical worldview, then we realize every part of this cafe can reflect the nature and character of God. The decor, the food, the service, just our conversation, every part of it. So you don't have to try and have a conversation where you talk about Jesus or the gospel before it becomes Christian. All of it we wanted to to sow seeds and open up people's hearts and minds so that they can, or not that we were opening up their hearts and minds, but a place where they could more naturally, more easily reflect on some of those big questions of life.
I'm not sure if you mentioned, I don't recall, the fact that you also had a library. There was a bookshelf with many titles, quite a big one, and well curated with a database and everything. You had I think Kathy or someone was an American that was in charge of the library. So it was also a place where you could go and just sit and read. And at that time, that was quite novel thing. You wouldn't find it. And then the other comment that I wanted to make is one of the reasons why it could not survive for longer is that in 2007, we joined the EU. And gradually but surely, we had to move to sanitary rules that were much more strict. I remember it was more complicated to bake the cakes. You couldn't do that anymore in the shop like it was in the beginning. It was very difficult to survive with a business that was built in another climate. Anyway, the economical climate and political is volatile in these countries. But when you start in one part and then you have to adapt to new rules, it's really very complicated. And but for the time that it was there, I think you did a great job. And also, I think you formed some special people, the people that worked with you and who went on to do other things. But we could see the investment. And actually, I work with one of them right now. It's Nicoleta, who was your event manager, and for a while, even the manager, some sort of a cafe manager. And now she's a professor at my university. We work in the same department.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
That's where I met her, actually.
And this is, an issue of business. We found that actually, we were used to the mission. That's the mission I was with. We'd run a thing called discipleship training schools, and people would come and you'd have this rather artificial environment for 3 months or 6 months, and they go away again. I found that employing someone who's with you then 8 hours a day for 5 days a week or whatever is an incredible opportunity for discipleship, because when you're working with them and you have in mind the kind of service that we want to provide, which is, inspired and rooted in Christian values of love and of hospitality and of excellence and truthfulness and so on, then that is an amazing opportunity for discipleship.
That's a real thing.
Because so in the workplace, you have extraordinary opportunities. So if the barman, gets all in a strop because somebody has offended him and starts, playing up, well, then you can take them aside and during their break and say, hey, let's talk about that. What was going on there in your heart and why were you reacting like that? Because, that's not a good way to be. And so on. You can really address issues that come up in the context of the workplace. So that was one of the surprising things that we found was the, if you like, a different way of doing discipleship. We also decided not to staff the cafe with youth with a mission kind of young people, because we needed commitment for, if you're going to run a commercial cafe, if you say you're open from 10 in the morning till 10 at night, your staff have to be there. You can't do that with volunteers. And so, well, certainly not the kind of volunteers we'd have in YWAM who will jump off to every Christian conference or worship meeting or whatever, rather than the hard work of, staying in and doing a long shift in a workplace. But those are great opportunities for discipling people. So I really commended that. That was a big surprise I never expected to discover.
Jonathan,
as you can see, there are many friends of Charles from Latvia here tonight. Around you, Jonathan, is just Rodica and myself from Romania. But I want you to be sure that we are very thankful to you for the fact that you brought here in our country and our town a special nuance of heaven. What you created in that cafe was, in fact, a kind of church, but very elegant. You brought something from God that is so unusual in our evangelical world. So thank you very much. You had a great, important influence in our town.
Oh, well, I don't think I deserve that. I think it was just such a blessing. You know, sometimes if you follow God's leading, you're willing to keep on learning, you're willing to try new things, you're willing to hold on to a crazy idea, like, you know, you feel like God has spoken to you in a basement cafe in Krakow and saying worldview cafe, and you sit with that for 10 years and you pray it, you kind of reflect on it. And then sometimes, you know, after, you know, years, it can come forth. And I think God sometimes works like that. You know, the long, slow growth of a vision, if you like. And it only succeeded because we had a lot of help. You know, I could have given up several times. We had amazing people to inspire us. We connected. If you like, God orchestrated it. I just happened to be the, you know, in that privileged place of you know, helping to make it happen. And I think that, you know, we all have opportunities to lead and to dream crazy things, you know, for God. And I really think that that is part of what we're called to do, is to you know, be willing to do something that seems crazy, but if you think and if you know that somehow God is in it, then you can discover some things. You know, I had no idea that Quo Vadis Cafe would end up the way it did. It was such a blessing, even though it was also really, really difficult at times, especially before we opened. It was incredibly hard. So there was one time when the guy doing the decor and the transformations, you know, it's like we were running out of money, we were running out of time. My wife was pulling her hair out because this was taking so much longer, and she was about to have a baby and wanted to go back to England. And I said, no, we're going to have to stay here because the cafe is about to open. And in fact, it was still many months before it opened. Anyway, around that time, we went with a mission team to another city, and there was an American team were there, led by a pastor, and he got in conversation with me and said, "Oh, tell us about what you're doing here in Romania." And I told him all about my frustrations and this challenge and the struggle of getting this cafe, which was now almost 2 years we'd been trying to work on it to get it open, and it still seems some way away. It's like I was almost, you know, I was just saying how difficult and hard it was. And he listened to all that carefully, and then he came up to me and he poked me in my chest, and he sort of, you know, quite firmly, and he just said, "Make it happen." You know? And it's like, it's as though that was a word from God, you know, to say, you know, don't complain, don't give up, persevere and make it happen. And I think that was a remarkable moment as well, which sustained me for the next several months of struggle and difficulty, because there are those times when you absolutely need something as simple as that as an encouragement to, you know, not to give up, because any great thing that God calls us to, it's going to be challenged. It's going to be contested. We're going to be tempted to give it up. And yet, if God has put that in our hearts, unless he clearly says, yeah, okay, you can lay that down, you can, you can leave it behind, then we need to persevere.
Jonathan.
Yeah.
I think we should wrap this up in 11 minutes. Okay.
That's good.
And I know that there have been 2 comments that have been made in the chats. And the first one is from Remy from Vilnius, Lithuania. And he says that they have a cafe in Vilnius, Mano Guru. And I wanted to just ask Remy, maybe take 1 minute. Tell us about this cafe, and is it part of your ministry?
No, but we just joined because they have on the main Vilnius street, the name is Vilnius Street, but it was started 18 years ago because our ex-mayor of the city, Artūras Zuokas, he gave a beautiful space for people, and they established a socialinį paramos projektą, a non-profit organization, and they made kind of a bridge that people after rehabilitation centers, they can integrate into society, that they could have a chance to come back. And through those 18 years, I think about 1,000 people already went through. Of course, it's huge ministry and some challenges, that people sometimes, they start again to, to use alcohol or drugs. So, but I know the director, Reda, and right now in that space, we want to do kind of open XTV studio that every evening we can do like some acoustic concerts or some meetings with art people, or to present some books, to meet some interesting people. So it's beautiful project in Vilnius, in our capital, on the main Vilnius city. Beautiful project. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great.
In the future, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about that. But then I want to ask the question that Effie Schmitz has written, and his question for you is, what steps would you recommend for someone looking to establish a cafe for individuals with addictions and support their recovery journey?
I think I will suggest to go straight to municipality, and it would be the best if you have those association of rehabilitation centers with some president of those rehabilitation centers of that association, just to go straight into municipality and to ask for some space to give for this activity.
Thank you, Remy. And Jonathan, what would you say?
Look, it's very important that you know what the purpose is of your cafe, your space. What is the purpose? And you have to, you may need to take quite a lot of time on that to say, so who is it for? What are we offering there? What impact do we want it to make? Why do we need a cafe for that? You got to think through all those questions. We had our clear thing from the beginning is it was going to be a space that was more about intellectual transformation, a worldview cafe. So that's what it was all geared towards, and that was what what God put on my heart. And so there's 101 different ways of setting up a cafe that's inspired by, and if you have a calling from God to do it, then it could look totally different and yet be absolutely equally inspired by the Lord and sort of empowered by the Holy Spirit. So it's really important to be thinking about, there's 2 or 3 key elements. One is the person, if you like, the relational side of it. That is, a physical space does nothing by itself. It's all about what kind of atmosphere and if you like, the relationships which are permitted, if you like, through that space. So you've got to think about your, if you like, the whole relational side of it. You've got to think all about the business model. How is it going to pay the bills? And so that's another whole theme to it. Another one is going to be, who is to be involved in this? Who are the partners? Who are the stakeholders? Who else should we involve? Who can we collaborate with? That's another key element. So, and then of course, what are you actually going to serve there if you're going to provide different things? So this, all those things, it's really worth spending time thinking through, praying through all those different things. And there's no sort of one formula or one pattern. And even if you're inspired by somewhere else, never assume that you can just copy that into the new context, because every context is different. And your calling is going to be a bit different. We're never called to set up something like someone else did. You know, what is God uniquely wanting to do in that place with those people, with that team? You know, so anyway.
Two things.
We're running out of time.
Rodica wants to say something, and I think Kurt wants to say something. Rodica, ladies first.
Just a short, hopefully last comment. What Jonathan did was very innovative at the time. He was ahead of the times. So both in terms of how the whole concept, the quality, the level, everything was above what we had in Cluj and in the country for most part. Today, probably Quo Vadis, as it was then, would be an average cafe. But at that time, it was top. So that is one of the lessons, that it was innovative. Secondly, from his example, and also the example of other cafes that changed the cafe culture in Cluj, I would mention the learning or the education aspect of it. If I remember correctly, Jonathan, you had texts that were educated people to what meant to be to have fair
fair trade, yeah, fair trade. Yeah,
I've never heard
ethical
of it before.
business.
I've never heard of it before. So that was an educational side to it. And I remember there were almost like a newspaper or a paper of some sort, well done, that was laying on the table, and you could read about it. And in the menu, you had informations about the cafe, where does it come from? And that was the seed of what later another Christian who has now a big chain of cafes in Cluj, he started to have a newsletter, probably once every 2 weeks. And I would go and drink my coffee there almost every day. Now it's too expensive to go daily, but I try to go once a week. But at that time it was more affordable. And I would take the newsletter and read it. And that's how the city was educated. So now people from Cluj won't drink any kind of coffee. Wherever they go, they look for the specialty coffee. And then they know the whole thing from medium, from the way it's roasted to the way it's grounded to when to combine it with milk or not or whatever, you know. So you mentioned that you addressed an intellectual a change of mind, and I think you also did it in a very educational way. So like you said, the concept needs to be rounded, and then to find the right methodology, the right tools to apply. And for what you wanted to do, I think you did great. And then other people followed, and yeah, it changed the face of the town.
Rodica, I really like what you said, that the concept of a coffee shop needs to be grounded.
Properly grounded.
And roasted.
I also liked whenever she said earlier that the library was a novel concept.
Yes. Oh. Grounded and novel. Well, English second language.
Professor Tillman, you want to say something?
Well, first, to ask your forgiveness for being late. Sorry, I had a conflict for the first half hour. But this whole conversation reminds me of a phrase that a friend of ours uses. Some of you may know him. His name is Duane Elmer, and he's a professor of Christian education. And he talks about Christian education as being the art of creating an environment in which Christ-centered learning community can thrive. And that phrase has been so helpful to me, because it applies not just to a classroom, but to a cafe, or to a board meeting, or to a group Zoom call. Wherever people come together, what are those things that we can do intentionally to create an environment that frees up the Holy Spirit to do what only the Holy Spirit can do at the end of the day? And it's not a formula for creating an environment, because to me, one of the things that makes it an art is you have to listen. It's an invitation to a conversation. And so in thinking about creating that environment, it's everything from the look of the room, the art on the wall, the light, the plants. It's the things that you serve, but it's also the posture that the people take. Is it a posture rooted in curiosity and not in propaganda, which is so often, I think, how Christians are perceived in these kinds of things. And it's just, you know, there are those things. You need to use every cell in your brain to think intentionally about creating that environment, but you're doing so only to invite the Holy Spirit to effect transformation. Because again, whether it's a classroom or a worship service or a cafe, that's how transformation happens.
Excellent. Jonathan, any final, I mean, not real final, any closing words?
Well, only I did want to take you back to the sculptures there, which are on my screen, my last screen there. Let me just quickly show you this and tell you why I'm sharing it. These are 2 of the 5 sculptures remaining from our Reformation anniversary exhibition from 2017-2018, which were in Cambridge. In the center of Cambridge, we had 5 sculptures inspired by the 5 solas of the Reformation. Since the exhibition ended, 2 of them have gone to Wheaton College. One of them went back to Cluj because they were all made by Liviu Mocan. So one is at the Art Museum in Cluj. But these 2 are remaining, and we thought they were both going to be taken by 2 different churches in Cambridge, but for different reasons, that's not worked out. So I'm praying for and looking for a church, a Christian college, or another public place where there would be a sponsor as well, or a philanthropist willing to purchase these 2 sculptures, you know, one or the other. So I'm just mentioning that to you guys. Please to pray for that. And also I've got a brochure for each of them, which I've made, and I would be happy to send them out. Well, maybe I could send it to Natalie, and if any of you would be interested, then maybe Natalie or Charles could send you these 2 brochures, which give more detail about each of them and so on. So that was my plug. Being a Christian arts community, I thought you may really be, that's something that may inspire you, maybe able to think of a place or an institution, a big church, maybe doing a whole rebuild, or a Christian college or other institution. Would be, yeah, it would be very grateful if you would pass the brochure on to anyone in a decision-making capacity there.
Where is it right now, the statue?
These 2 are in Cambridge. One is still in the church, and the other, the anchor, which is just fabulous, is unfortunately in storage, so you can't even see it. So
they're both amazing. Oholiab, you had your hand up.
Yeah. I just want to add something that Jonathan mentioned, that in those photos that you have seen, were two people. One of them became the prime minister of Romania.
Yeah.
And the other one that Jonathan did not mention is the actual director of the National Art Museum of Romania.
Oh.
Călin Stegerean. Now, why I mentioned that is because through this example, we can see that what got created through Jonathan there was such an open space for great people to join. Because we evangelicals, especially in Romania, we are considered being the peripheria of society. We are not welcome almost anywhere. People do not come in our environments because we are narrow and aggressive. So Jonathan created something where great people were happy to go. Amen.
Amen. Jonathan, we all say thank you to you very, very much. What a wonderful discussion we've had now for an hour and a half. And I would like to close our, before I close in prayer, I want to show you one thing, just to share the screen for a second. And, where did it go? Here we go. This is a prayer from John Wesley, and I've begun using it when I close presentations and churches. But I wanted us to just look at this, and I changed it a little bit to the the we instead of you. But I'd like to read this as a kind of a benediction for this time. This is by John Wesley, modified slightly. Ready? We commit to do all the good we can. Oh, by the way, can you see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We commit to do all the good we can, by all the means we can, in all the ways we can, in all the places we can, at all the times we can, to all the people we can, as long as we ever can. Amen. I love you all. Good to see you. Looking forward to seeing some of you in Europe beginning next week.
Yes, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Yeah, that was great.
My pleasure. Great to see you. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Great to see you.
Oh, there we go.
Oh
Just
boy, you
the
you
remnant
got-
remain.
Yeah, here's the troika now.
Very good.
Well,
Thank you,
John.
Charles. Thanks for that opportunity. I never get tired of telling the story of the cafe because it was such a joy to have, for God to have called us and given us the opportunity to create that space, and for all the, the blessing it brought. I loved it. I really did. I've forgotten all the really difficult aspects